we believe that LLMs have solved the extraction problem in commercial construction. We're saying with the right structure and framework, LLMs out of the box can solve a lot of these problems. And you do not need to reinforce or retrain or do any sort of reinforcement learning for these existing models to excel in the commercial construction space. The core thesis, what we want to prove is LLMs have solved the easy part of estimating, which reveals that we're solving the wrong problem. Counting was never really the hard part.
So what's my argument today? My argument, ultimately, is that LLMs are good at a lot of things. To Mike's point, it can help with spec review, but it can't count things. Symbols are not language. These are LLMs. Large language models. They are not vision models. LLMs are really good at predicting the next token if it's language, if it's text. That's where it excels. But as soon as you don't have that, which is the majority of other disciplines, it doesn't work. So it's not good at counting volumes. It's not good at counting areas. It's not good at measuring lines. It's barely good at counting symbols if there's no text.
I think with the new releases, the multimodal large language models that are coming out and have been released, it doesn't even need to have text. It can have the contextual shape of that actual piece of equipment, that material, whatever is supposed to be in the drawings, based on the context of the project set. That has been proven. I think the latest data shows that by contextually showing symbols, it increases it to like 80 to 90% through visual cued chain of thought.
Yeah, so even at 80%, it's not solved, right? It's like it's still a big delta. I mean, like the average human, when they're reviewing this, is getting to like 95%. It's like worse. It's worse than a human right now. So I mean, how can we say it's solved?
Good afternoon, morning and evening to wherever everyone's listening from. And this is the first of Bricks and Bytes Debates. And it's a new format that we're trying, where we pick a hot topic and we take two experts. Today we have Luigi and Mike, and with opposing viewpoints to debate a topic with the aim of educating everyone here and letting you decide which position you take. And whilst other people hide behind their PR teams, social media accounts, and event booths, Luigi and Mike voluntarily put themselves forward to jump into the AEC Octagon and set the pace for the types of conversations that should be happening more often in our industry. So with that, anyone that's listening to this, whether it's live or or afterwards, if there's a topic or a debate that you want to see happen on Bricks and Bytes, reach out to me on LinkedIn or email, and we will make that happen. But for today's contestants, in the blue corner, we have Luigi, the stinger, Corte, the co-founder of and CEO of BuildVision. You've been training, Luigi?
I have, yeah. Only dumbbells for this one.
I'm surprised the Christmas jumper fit.
Me too.
And BuildVision is an AI-powered risk reduction platform for pre-construction. And rumor has it you recently just spent your entire life savings on a domain provision.com, right?
That's true. Yeah, personal savings.
Good work.
That's where the seed round went.
Pull a Newman and rent the domain back to your company.
That's right. Yeah. Adam Newman style.
And in the red corner, we have Mike Mighty Powers, the co-founder and CEO of BuildVision, which is a procurement platform for MEP equipment, and recently has become a huge fan, as we are learning, of out-of-the-box LLMs. And I'm sure we will hear more about that today. And today's contest will be moderated by Patrick, praying for Exits Hellerman, general partner at Fundamental. And Patrick, I think I will hand over to you right now. But before I do that, let me just play this. There we go.
And I have to say, any time in my life I have ever watched a UFC fight. So I have to assume that's what you just played, Owen. Is that it?
You are 100% right. I think, Patrick, I was having a conversation with you around a year ago, and I said I would love to bring some UFC vibes to the AEC industry. So today is the start of that, hopefully.
Nice. Almost mission accomplished, right? So praying is what we do, guys. And so the debate today, we're going to cover basically three segments. We're going to look at technical context, technical feasibilities with you two, then the practicalities of the real world, AEC in our context, as well as the customer value. So we'll work through the debate through these three, but important to say to all the viewers,
So don't necessarily add Mike or Luigi with hate or whatever, because we structured the debate as a role play. Okay, so Luigi and Mike both agreed to take certain extreme positions. And while I'm sure there's a grain of, truth in either of your positions, I think, thanks to both of you, you also agreed to represent a bull case or a bear case, depending on how you look at it, for the sake of the debate. So we're gonna role play it a little bit, because we thought that by presenting more extreme viewpoints, it will allow everyone to perhaps explore the bandwidth of possibilities of this debate, right? So it's an intellectual role play, so to speak. And so with that, what we're going to do is we're going to start with opening statements. We're like in the courtroom right now. We're going to start with opening statements by Mike and Luigi, and then we're going to work a little bit through the real world practicalities and the customer value. So with that, Mike, no further ado, over to you.
Awesome, Patrick. Thanks for having me. And thanks for hosting this. And Luigi, thank you for agreeing to debate me today. I'm excited for this. So to just really frame the BuildVision, my position, we believe that LLMs have solved the extraction problem in commercial construction, which makes this shift to a new bottleneck, where the actual decision is made and how you govern that decision. So we're not saying that you can just launch a document into ChatGPT and you get an automated response, or sending 3,000 pages to a ChatGPT and getting an automated response if here's a full takeoff. We're saying with the right structure and framework, LLMs out of the box can solve a lot of these problems, and you do not need to reinforce or retrain or do any sort of reinforcement learning for these existing models to excel in the commercial construction space. And with that, we're actually launching all of our AI tooling at no cost to customers through BuildVision Labs. So you can do MVP takeoffs, you can do spec comparisons and compliance. So again, the core thesis, what we want to prove is LLMs have solved the easy part of estimating, which reveals that we're solving the wrong problem. Counting was never really the hard part. Deciding what was right is actually the hard part. Luigi, I'll pass it to you.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. Great to debate you, by the way. So let me give a little bit of context of how this came out, just for the audience. So Mike and I were bickering back and forth on LinkedIn, and it was such a good, authentic conversation. We said, let's bring this to the masses. So we got in touch with Owen and Patrick, and here we are. So I'm talking in my capacity as just someone who plays with LLMs, but my background is I'm running a company, Provision. We're building the AI estimator. At least that's what we're saying to the market. Estimating is a lot of things. Let's be clear, okay? Estimating is not just quantity takeoffs. I just hopped on LinkedIn. KP Reddy just said estimating is not counting things. Like, I agree, it's not counting things. It's more than that. There's many workflows. But if you go talk to the small general contractor or sub, it's part of their process. They spend time counting things, and there's many things to count. So what's my argument today? My argument ultimately is that LLMs are good at a lot of things. To Mike's point, it can help with spec review, but it can't count things. Symbols are not language. These are LLMs, large language models. They are not vision models. But, for rigor, I will also include VLMs within your argument, Mike, so it can be even a more rigorous debate. So what I'm arguing today is that LLMs, even multimodal LLMs that have visual language model components, or they're multimodal, they still can't do takeoffs appropriately. And I'll provide 3 good reasons why that's not the case. 1, they just simply can't do it. I mean, like, Mike, I would even ask you right now, open ChatGPT, throw in a single page, and give us accurate counts. Give us accurate areas, give us a volume, give us a line, and give us symbol counts. If it can do that, the point's proven, we can end the debate. But you won't be able to, because it's just not possible. 2, estimating needs context, right? You just can't estimate these things in a vacuum. If you go to fire sprinklers, for example, you can't count them, at least depending on what you're counting, right? Because you need to look at what the National Fire Code is to be able to know what they actually are. So you can't do that in a vacuum. And 3, memory limits in LLMs. They just, you cannot get the right context because you have to downscale these images. So those are the 3 arguments I'll go over today. But, I'll pass it back to Patrick, and then we can go from there.
So fantastic. I really loved your opening statements, because they already paint the bandwidth that we're going to operate with today. And I was going to start with this, guys. So I feel like one of the more unfair expectations that the general public is having at AI is that we're moving the goalposts for AI in some ways. I don't know if you guys noticed this, right? But whenever we speak about AI, it has to be perfect. But the human that we hire, we accept flaws, right? And so when it comes to perhaps the application of AI in estimating, do we really need 100% accuracy and precision? Can we live with 80 or not? So let's not answer this question, but it's something that for the context, let's start with this, guys. And Mike, I'll pun it to you. So walk us through from a technical perspective, what can AI actually already do today to a sufficiently high degree? And then Luigi, I would like you to follow up with where does it fail? So what can it do, Mike? Where does it fail?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start just like the super beginning. So everyone has received a specs section that's 3,000 pages long, or a set of construction drawings that are 1,000 pages long. Gemini 3.0 right now can categorize and parse all those documents within a couple minutes. And what I mean by that is it will go through every page and it will tag it as a mechanical schedule, an electrical one-liner, this specific spec section. So that's kind of like process number one, is actually structuring down what is actually coming across the board. AI is phenomenal at that. That's foundationally what an LLM does. It guesstimates kind of the next, or it creates a priority or a position of like what the next word is and what the next token is in a process. Step two is when you take that context. So you never want to like send 3,000 pages up and store that as context in the memory. The new ChatGPT 5.2 actually has some really cool tooling to actually reduce and expand memory and context. But as of right now, out of the box, then you take that structured data. So you take the mechanical schedule and ask it to pull down mechanical equipment from that schedule. 100% of the time on PDFs that are clear, that schedule will come down into a structured set. So it will show the air handling unit. It will show all the design specs. It will show all that information. So that's step number two. Then step number three is now you can go to, just in the mechanical world, you can go into the mechanical drawing plan schedule plans and actually have it count all the equipment that it took off. So it'll find the GRDs, it will find the air handling unit, it will find the fan, the VAVs, everything on the mechanical, electrical, plumbing side. That is a solved problem. And when I say solved, I mean it's going to give you 100% certainty on the things it did find, or flag it to the human of the things that it did not find. So to zoom out, the long-term thing is instead of spending 5 hours to do a full takeoff, you can now upload documents, parse documents, categorize documents, do takeoffs for documents within 5 minutes, getting you 90 to 95% of the way there. And then you just have to review the additional 5 to 10% of flagged cases by the AI model to confirm that's right. So now your time reduction is like a 90% reduction in time. So out of the box, that is a solved problem with models that are set up right now. And then there's some really cool cross corroboration pieces that you can start pinning together of taking mechanical schedule, taking the mechanical equipment, comparing to the specifications, finding alternates, finding scope gaps. All of that is just contextual large language models that you don't have to do anything special to do. Again, that's why we're releasing it as for customers to leverage. It's super easy, super basic, and it really kind of commoditizes that specific portion of the market. So I'll pause there.
Luigi, before you go, just one double click, Mike. So I can't help but think, but the word that you didn't say was drawings. Is that right?
Yeah, so those are the construction drawings. So schedules, the plans, all of that is a solved problem. And then I know we'll try to dive into some of the unique shapes that are in construction drawings. You can pre-feed the first page of mechanical drawings, the first page of the architectural drawings that shows those symbols. And the latest release is showing like 96% accuracy on those metrics. And we'll be releasing these benchmarks in January. But those visual models, those VLMs are actually able to recognize specific symbols for specific projects based on specific areas and find those on the drawings. I'm not saying it's solving the hidden ductwork that is on a 2D drawing that can only be shown in a 3D drawing. Like that's never going to be solved. That's more about how we push information back and forth. But when it's on the drawings, it can be counted on the drawings, no matter if it's a symbol, if it's a EF1, or if it's an air handling unit, anything like that.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. Luigi, what can it not do?
Sure. Let me say what it can do first. LLMs are really good at predicting the next token if it's language, if it's text. That's where it excels. That's where the training data is, right? So all the training data that's been used to train these LLMs, it's all text-based. You have a fraction of that for images. So What can it do really well? It's really good at text. So when Mike says it's solved, it's only solved for mechanical because those equipment on plans have text next to them. So if you go to a mechanical plan, and I want to count my variable frequency drives, for example, if they have text next to them that says VFD-1-2, it's trivial for ChatGPT or any model to count them because it just gets the embedded text. And so that's such a small sample set of what you see within these drawings. If there was no text there, you would not be able to get the count. So what can it do? It can read text, right? And it can infer, okay, I saw this VFD thing 20 times. There must be 20 of them. That's what it can do. But as soon as you don't have that, which is the majority of other disciplines, it doesn't work. So it's not good at counting volumes. It's not good at counting areas. It's not good at measuring lines. It's barely good at counting symbols if there's no text. So this is where we differ in our opinion. I think Mike's talking about the specific case within mechanical drawings where it's preceded by, some text identifier. And I'm saying, yes, that's true. That's true. But it's such a subset of what you do when you're doing, let's say, a takeoff. So that's why it doesn't work.
And guys, perhaps for the uninitiated, so the perfect situation, Mike, first to you, the perfect situation where the drawings, the schedules, documents contain everything that a generic LLM needs. How often does that situation occur in real life?
I would say the majority of the time in commercial instruction, the documents have a direction that they're pointed in that are contextually right. And the value of LLMs is it flags the things that are missing and the scope gaps that happen, right? Like it's going to ask like, hey, you need this specific fire rating on this wall based on the context of the drawing. It's very, very good at those things, and it's only getting better and better. And we're starting to see that.
And is that for a specific type of project? I think the 3 billion hospital that you build in the Bay Area, or would you say it happens across the board?
Across the board.
Okay. Luigi, what would Mike have to say, or what would the technology perhaps have to do to convince you of Mike's position?
Well, Mike's position, I'm not sure I actually understand Mike's position. Mike, is your position that if equipment has text next to it, that you can count it 100% of the time?
No. I think with the new releases, the multimodal large language models that are coming out and have been released, it doesn't even need to have text. It can have the contextual shape of that actual piece of equipment, that material, whatever is supposed to be in the drawings, based on the context of the project set. So feeding into that model, you're thinking about those stages. Hey, I've structured down all my data. I'm going to now take the symbols from the mechanical page M101, feed it into the model, and count those symbols. That has been proven. I think the latest data shows that by contextually showing symbols, it increases it to like 80 to 90% through visual cued chain of thought. I'm happy to post that article, but it's like fascinating how accurate and scaled that becomes. And again, the whole point is it's not 7%, it's 90+%. And then you flag the cases that each human in the loop reviews to make sure that it's as accurate as possible.
Yeah. So look, even at 80%, it's not solved, right? It's like it's still a big delta. I mean, like the average human when they're reviewing this is getting to like 95%. So it's like worse. It's worse than a human right now. So
is that true?
How can we say it's solved?
So if it takes a human 5 hours to do it at 95%, and it takes a model 5 minutes to get to 80% or 90%, it's flagging the rest. I'm guaranteeing you it takes the human less time than 5 hours to review that last bit that is just flagged. That might need contextual basis to do that.
Maybe.
So having to say that from a solve perspective, I would say LLMs have solved the moat of needing to do manual takeoffs moving forward.
It's just not being done. It's just not being done now, right? Like, and again, this is just symbol identification. Look, if this is a little bit later in the talk, but if you look at actual counting, right? There's like 5 types of counting. Okay, there's text. So if you look at, let's say, owner furnished equipment, if they have a table that says, okay, printers, there's 3 of them, or carbon monoxide detectors, there's 10 of them, for example. It's a bad example. That's solved. You're right. That's solved because it's text. If there are symbols, like if you go to, let's say, fire suppression, I mean, it's not solved at all. I mean, we tried this yesterday with 5.2, even with heavy thinking and letting it run for 4 hours, it just cannot separate the noise from signal for memory issues, which I'll expand on later. And that's just 2 of the 5. Then you have lines, and then you have areas, and you have volumes. So Mike, sheet metal, can LLMs currently estimate the surface area required for sheet metal?
Is the area that's on the drawing the actual area that's actually installed at the end of the project?
Let's just say yes, for the sake of
It's
this
not,
argument.
though. It's a 2D drawing in a 3D world, so you're wasting time doing takeoffs. You as a subcontractor own intent. You're owning the intent of how much ductwork needs to be installed. If they decide to change the sprinkler post-construction, the estimate that you did 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months ago doesn't matter. So you're spinning your wheels trying to solve that problem.
But that just reinforces my point, right? Because then how can it be commoditized if it's not possible in the drawings?
It's commoditized in the point that it doesn't actually need to be done.
Well, someone needs to estimate the sheet metal.
You're doing it, but again, you can't use a 2D drawing to validate a 3D takeoff on sheet metal.
You can validate it, sure, but then it's not solved, right? Like if the estimate isn't solved because you can't
we're talking about takeoffs, and you're going in and you're estimating how much sheet metal is needed in a room. Like you're not going through and saying, hey, I saw in the drawings there was this 2x2 foot ductwork, and this is my exact price, and that's all I'm installing. The subcontractor owns intent. So spinning the wheels of actually doing that takeoff is a value losing proposition.
Okay, but someone is still doing that work. Like someone's still actually estimating the amount of sheet metal that they need, and it's going to be based on the drawings. So my point is this, is like, if you're just only looking at symbols, not even that is solved. If you're just looking at text, it's solved. But again, mechanical is just one division out of many, and we're talking about one very specific thing. So that's why I'm saying, like, the whole argument is like, it's not solved, it's not commoditized. You can't even do it today. I mean, like if you go upload, let's say a simple drawing set, just architectural, to ChatGPT, and you go to heavy thinking, just let it run. It won't actually be able to get you like accurate quantity takeoffs. And even if you do your method, which is, let's say you're using it more programmatically, you still can't accurately do it, for reasons that I can go into later. So look, if it's text next to symbols, it's possible, it's good. But other than that, that's just like one case out of many edge cases within estimating. And this is why nobody can do instant, very accurate estimates now out of the box. And this is why VCs are investing money, because it's not a solved problem.
So let me attempt a preliminary conclusion, guys. So does that mean both sides here actually agree that the current state of large models cannot accurately count sides and quantify dimensions? Are both of you in agreement about that statement?
Size is being 3D. It's not going to it's not going to calculate 3D model or volume capacity off of the 2D drawing. If that's what you're saying.
Okay. Or even the correct dimension of the 2D,
human
of the 2D surface area.
A human does it. When they're doing concrete, they're not making a BIM model, right? They're going to take
a human does it. I understand. I'm trying to get the preliminary conclusion of whether both of you actually agree on that statement. So the basically the line counting and the 2D dimensions, a large model cannot do it reliably. Mike, would you agree with that?
Yeah, because I don't think it's a source of truth. Like, the 2D model doesn't matter for that. You can't use it as a source of truth. Yeah.
I think that's the second preliminary conclusion, is that actually we're kind of working out that some work perhaps isn't even worth doing of the AI in the first place. So that's hotly to be debated further. I just want to introduce that study, Mike, that you referenced. So this is a study that, among others, Yann Lequin actually participated in. It's from mid this year, but there were other lead researchers on the paper. I dropped the link here in the chat, guys. And so effectively, let me quote here. So MLLMs still fail at basic visual reasoning. They can't reliably count the sides of simple shapes, showing they don't actually understand geometric concepts like edges, vertices, or boundaries. But a new technique called Visual EQ Chain of Thought, VCCOT, works only when we manually annotate the image and force the model to reason step by step using those visual cues. So in layman's terms, what they did in that study is actually they put letters next to the polygon sides. And so when the letters were there, the VCCOT was able, through that process, to actually almost completely accurately count the number of sides. In fact, it jumped from, help me out, guys, I think 7% without the annotated sides to 93% with the annotated sides, which to a layman would prove that, hey, it's been trained on letters. It's been trained on certain amount, that's a dictionary of symbols, but now you can actually reliably count, right? So that was quite interesting. And so the counting symbols versus measuring dimensions I would argue it's quite good at counting symbols versus the measuring dimensions, perhaps as we just concluded, not yet as solved. But so what does that mean for the true reasoning of AI? Not the automation aspect of it, but the reasoning aspect about scale or spatial layout, geometry. What do you guys argue is actually the reasoning part here with that study in the background?
Guys, after this response, 2 seconds, I'm just going to bring some of the audience responses in here. So some interesting comments that we should include as part of this discussion. So
Yeah, let's do that.
carry on, and then we'll do that.
Luigi, you want to take that, or let me take it first?
I want to make sure I understand the question, Patrick. Are you asking what the LLM is reasoning about? Maybe help me understand a little bit more before I answer.
Is it pure automation, or are we actually going into a reasoning and deeper intelligence here?
Okay, look, it's the latter. You can go verify this yourself, right? If you have a pro subscription to ChatGPT, put on heavy thinking, and then look at the analysis that it's doing. It is trying to reason over these documents. And if you give it a symbol counting task, like let's go back to fire sprinklers, right? What it's going to do is it's just going to use publicly available libraries for computer vision. So, the VLM itself is memory constrained. It doesn't work on drawings for reasons I can get into later, but it has to downscale these images. There's too much information and it takes too much memory. So what it does is it just goes into let's say its terminal, it downloads OpenCV, a computer vision library, and then it's just going to start cropping, bits of the document to see if it can find sprinklers. And so it's going to do that until it can find them. It doesn't do it well. I mean, I would love to see someone put some data in front of me that says, hey, here's our evaluation. On this drawing, there is, 20 smoke detectors with no text or some with text. And this is how many the model found. No one showed me this. Like, I haven't seen it. In fact, the only thing I've seen is from AEC Foundry, which is, it looks like they're offering some services with respect to AI. And in their evaluation, it shows that across the 7 models that they've used, it looks like, there's a mean average percentage error of about 18, 19% with the best model, which means it's only wrong about 20% of the time for symbols, which is not bad, but that's just for symbols. Again, my whole point here is that estimating is more than symbol counting, and all of the other things can be done. And to Mike's previous point, yeah, sure, the subcontractor takes maybe design intent for certain things, but let's say about sanitary sewers, that those are on the drawings. You can measure those. A human can. An LLM just can't do that. So the whole intent argument kind of falls apart there when the drawings are, you can't actually take them off, as some people do. Anyway, go back to the earliest point. What do I actually mean by reasoning? Yes, it is trying to reason. It's trying to take snippets, but again, we're really constrained by what the model can see, which is why it doesn't work well.
Yeah, I think I think the data that's coming out with the new releases, and I'm going to put ChatGPT 5.2 as like 3rd tier now in model performance, where Gemini and Claude are, I would say, far and away better at these different these different types of reasoning. For like spatial reasoning, I think that this contextual window of using letters to put on polygons gets us closer to be able to solve that polygon problem. So the bet would be to continue to iterate with those models and guess that in the next 6 to 12 months, that will be a solved problem in the application. From a long context stability perspective, the latest research is actually showing that there's different ways to expand memory. So you're getting close to, hundreds of thousands of tokens of input that can be referred to with almost 100% accuracy. So again, token windows are expanding, which creates longer context and stability, which helps drive a lot more value prop where, again, uploading documents to a ChatGPT model and just asking it broad questions are not the solution, but taking a structured scaffolding approach to doing this is a solved problem.
Okay. Before I take us to the final point of the technical round, which is, I'm curious about what we actually define here as the benchmark in accuracy. Owen, wanted to insert a few comments perhaps from the group here.
Yeah, I think just going back to some of the earlier points, Mo states that Mike's idea works for perfect drawings. And by perfect drawings, he means drawings where there are no errors, notes, which say, hey, for simplification, we use one instead of two bubbles. So basically like a very clear and concise drawing, which everyone understands. Kishan has gone a little bit further. He says, you need nothing in AI is solved. You need a good UX/UI to work alongside with AI, similar to Cursor, and multiple orchestration plus classical computer vision models to support the V/LLM. I think you're getting to those points between you.
Yeah, just to reiterate, I think Kashan at the end, his last point is very, very important. Like that document was from like 4.0 series models, like Gemini 3.0 Pro, Claude Opus 4.5. I know we're getting into technicalities, are like 7 to 10 times better than these existing models. And if you extrapolate that and you take the position that the models will continually get better, any of these edge cases are now solved problems. And what I mean by that is if you contextualize it correctly, you'll be able to get the output that you want. And a user should be able to do that pretty easily in a model.
Yeah, what Kishan said is the paper has an inherent bias. It uses generate figures that has adversarial effects to the models. The paper also stopped at the 4.0 model, as Mike just said. VLM have evolved a lot since then. That was in relation to the paper that was discussed earlier.
I'll take that as at face value right now. I'm not sure if I agree with that, but I'm also not. So I need to do more research to challenge you, Kishan, on both of those points. Not on the 4.0 and that we evolved much more since then, but I'm not convinced that it actually evolved in that direction as much. But I also can't disprove you. So let's take it at face value, Kishan. Moving us a little bit to the end of the technical round. So guys, we said it at the top of the conversation, right? So we're sometimes expecting of AI what we wouldn't expect of a human counterpart, right? So that's the accuracy discussion that we had. Can you guys just for me perhaps define what you think your customers actually expect in terms of accuracy from either human or automated solution? How would you define it?
I could take that one first. It's all trust but verify. So pointing the direction of everything that the AI is making a suggestion and having them confirm it's accurate, and bubbling up or populating any conflicts of confidence. So consistently showing benchmarkings to customers, consistently showing confidence scores to customers, and never letting an AI make a decision that is not reviewed by a human in the loop.
So at what, sorry, Luigi, before you go, Mike, at what accuracy percentage? However, let's say go with your definition or go with an arbitrary definition of accuracy for a moment. But at what like percentage number would your customer say, I'm not going to bother further with a solution like this? What do you think the customers would tell you?
I think we're north of 90%. If you're inaccurate more than 15 to 20% of the time, I think that's a red flag that's going to populate. But again, like everything that it's doing is like it's exposing a UI that like literally shows, hey, we found 17 fire alarms in this specific drawing. Here's exactly where we found them. Here's the actual like technical definition. Here's the source document back to that information. And letting that user verify it. Again, what's really cool about that is then you can actually start reinforced learning, training the outcomes. So as it starts building up these edge cases, you're building up the model to get those a better decision.
And that absolutely makes sense, right? I mean, who in our industry and in our profession actually likes black boxes? I have yet to meet someone. The trust but verify, Mike, that you're saying, I think is a very powerful statement to that end. But showing how work has been performed can actually bridge that gap. Mike, do you think, Luigi, before you go, do you think that actually that accuracy expectation moves further upward? Because I think had we had this debate a year ago, you might have said 70% actually. Do you think it's going to move further upstream?
Yeah, I would agree. You're seeing this in self-driving as an example. I mean, I think the last 3 nines are always going to be very, very hard, but we'll be at a point in the next 12 to 18 months where we're at 95 to 99% accuracy. There's still going to be edge cases. And just like you see with like Tesla self-driving, it's taken them 10 years to go from 99% to 99.999% accuracy. So it's always trust but verify, human in the loop for all those pieces.
Not to make it about Tesla, but I think another sensor choice might have also helped that platform. But Luigi, how would your customers actually define their expectation for accuracy?
So our customers are general contractors. They have different accuracy needs compared to subs who are underwriting the risk the financial risk of winning the job. Subs generally want to be more accurate than GCs. GCs want to have more directional quantities so they know if their sub pricing is in line with their expectations. So we're typically seeing accuracy requirements from GCs to be between 80 to 90%. And I think Victor just said something similar in the chat here. Regardless, they still care deeply about accuracy, and accuracy looks like a couple of things to them. To the GC, it looks like, are we getting all the scope? Am I aware of all the scope? If they create a scope package, are they getting all the required divisions? Do they know that the subs that they need to hire are listed in their scope packages? And then are there line items for all the scope? Then there's the quantities. Then the quantities get multiplied by whatever the quantity cost is, and there's a labor rate, and then you start getting towards like a more fulsome estimate, right? But even in identifying scope, that is not even a solved problem, because you have to be able to look visually on the documents to find things that you're not looking for. So it's not like I upload a drawing and I say, is there a printer? Because you can do that. If you enumerate everything, you're going to be prompting this thing forever. You're going to ask a billion questions. You have to be able to find scope that you're not looking for. And again, this is why I think it's not a solved problem. There's many more divisions than just mechanical that comprise an estimate. And again, symbol counting is one of 5 tasks that you do. If you ask a DC, what is an estimate? It's everything from 03. Well, it's obviously going to start at their general conditions at 01, but 03 is when they really start paying attention, maybe some demo, and then it's going to go to usually like 30, 31. And each of those have different requires for an estimate. So if you ask them, it's like 80, 90% for all the scopes that they care about. Me, when we're looking at building something that is defensible, we think about it in terms of F1, which is basically a balance between recall and precision. It just means we're finding the right things. We don't have false negatives or false positives, and we're actually showing the customer what they want. But I can elaborate on that.
So would it be, I'm taking what you say, Luigi, right? So the F1 versus Mike's trust but verify approach with Mike's customers. And I find appeal in both statements, but I can't help but wonder, does it also mean that perhaps your 2 opposing positions are about different expectations for what the technology is supposed to do? So does it mean, Luigi, in your case, it's solved when it's fully automated, versus Mike, in your case, it's solved when it's sufficiently augmenting and saving time? Is that the difference here?
I can talk about my perspective, Mike, if you want.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Luigi. Go ahead.
Yeah. So to me, I'm coming into this conversation thinking that if estimation was solved, it's one click, every division, every task is good enough accuracy. That's what I think is solved. Yes, they're going to want to trust but verify, but if you verify enough, they're going to trust you. And then eventually they're not going to want to verify, and things are going to get a lot faster. To me, that's solved. We're very far from that now. Even the companies that are getting funded right now, it's still human in the loop. We're still talking about replacing takeoff software, not with an agent that's just doing this in the background. It's with human in the loop tools. So basically Bluebeam plus AI, right? So it's all trust. So it's all verify, really. So that's why I think we're very far from that. There's no one system that can just automate and verify that the takeoff quantities that you put in are accurate. And that's why, again, if we're talking about the letter of the law, what we're arguing here, it is not solved because we can't do that. If you're saying, yes, can you put a human in a loop and verify it? Then yes, then by that definition, it is solved. But, I wouldn't say that's solved for self-driving.
Okay.
Right? Self-driving
Mike,
is...
do you want to instantly reply, or do you want me to first throw in a metaphor?
Go ahead. You go ahead. It's all you.
So I'm looking at the chat here. It's fascinating. We're getting such a great input along the way. And Luigi, to build on what you said also, and Mike, you about the self-driving. So let me make a crude metaphor here, right? And building on what Victor said in the chat. So we had, in the early 1900s, we had basically cars that, if any of us had to drive them today, we would probably be very, very unhappy, right? But at least we got cars. We replaced horse-drawn carts, okay? And then for the next 100 years, we still had to operate the cars ourselves. They got better and better and better. ICEs got better. Eventually, we got electric. And now Waymo cracked self-driving, right? I mean, the first time I drove in a Waymo was in Los Angeles, actually. amazing experience, right? So it's unbelievable what technology can do. So in these three stages, 1900, then the next 100 years, and self-driving, where do your customers expect the value from AI estimating to be? Is it the 1900 version? Is it the next 100 years? Or is it the fully automated?
I spoke too much on the last one, Mike. If you want to take it from there, comments on yours.
Yeah, I have to take that. Yeah, so again, the lens that we're looking through it as we build to be this next generation company is if you look at an AI tool, AI functionality, if you can go into a core model and get 80% of the way there or vaguely close, I think the value prop for that tool will go to zero in the next 12 to 18 months. So we can talk through, hey, it's 80% accurate, 90% accurate, or 99% accurate. We are only seeing explosion towards 100% accurate across all these models and all these net new releases. So with that bet, we're building the business model that they will be at 100%. And all we have to do is just plug into the best foundational model at the time. And we're seeing it at 80%, we're seeing it at 90%. It keeps getting better and better with every new release. It's taking us to, we can delete code in our software with new model releases. We can delete context in our software with new model releases. And that's
Mike,
what we're seeing the value prop. Yeah.
So Mike, then you're saying we're really, with your customers, you're arguing we're right now in this 100-year time frame of the automobile, hyper time compressed, and we're jumping to Waymo very soon.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Luigi?
Look, I think a lot of people think the same thing, riding the wave, as it's called. You basically wait for the model to catch up with what you would like it to do. And you want to be in a good position to, extract value from that or to add value to your customers' lives and, make some money. And I agree with that. I just think that it's like a strategy of hope, right? And I think directionally Mike is right. But I think when you look at the specifics, there are just too many unsolved challenges that I don't know if it's prudent just to hope that the models get better. Because let me give you an example. If you're looking at a drawing, VLMs, if you have a multimodal LLM, let's say like ChatGPT, and you ask it to look at a drawing, it has a hard time distinguishing between existing requirements or existing state and then new requirements, right? Which a human could do well. It's just a different shade of gray or black on a drawing. But let's say it doesn't, it makes a mistake, which we've seen it does. Now you have a false positive, okay? False positives are worse, in my opinion, than a false negative. If you get a false negative, maybe you undercount scope. But again, as a GC, you give it to the sub. If you have a false positive, that means you're potentially going to be getting a different scope package. That's way worse. So that's just a very specific example, but we have not seen VLMs yet be able to articulate the difference between those things. And that's just one example. So your earlier question, Patrick, I know I didn't answer it. I think our customers are expecting the same experience that they get when they hire an estimator. I hire an estimator, right? Estimators do a lot of things. I can see Dustin in the chat just be like, oh, they do a lot more than just quantity takeoffs. But one component of it is, hey, like there's certain people at large companies who are just doing quantity takeoffs and they're validating that the quantities that they've taken off or that the scope packages that they are going to market with are valid. And I think that will be commodified. I think there'll be a lot of solution providers in the future. I just don't think it's right now. I still think that's maybe 3-4 years away.
So we're in the middle of the customer value discussion now, guys. We segued quite nicely over here. Let's pick a few of those questions, and then I liked one question that Charles had in the chat. Charles, I'll come back to that question too. So guys, the reality of construction is, why is trust so important? It's important because we're in a project economy and everything tends to be lot size one. So we build things for the first time. We might know the process, but this specific product, this specific project, we haven't built in that configuration exactly. That happens all the time in our industry. And when we do fail at that lot size one, the consequences tend to be quite high. They can bankrupt companies, etc. So we all are aware of this. And so the way that our industry has solved a lot for that is track record, or call it trust, right? So I work with parties that I have validated before. I trust their methods. I trust their competence. I trust that they show up. I trust that they get stuff right. So trust is super important. But the need for trust comes because liability is a thing in this industry. And both of you operate in North America. So perhaps talk to us about liability in the context of estimating and perhaps a little bit broader, if you like, about AI in general. Whoever wants to start, talk to me about liability.
Yeah, I can take that one to start. I mean, liability, specifically in North America, at least in the United States, is whatever the contractual documents are intended to have. So doing full document takeoffs and there isn't a smoke dampener or fire sprinkler in a specific room, the subcontractor owns the intent. So I think like holistically, like it still needs to be a trust but verified system. There needs to be a mutable record that all parties can leverage to see what changes happened, why they changed it, who signed off on it, what's the audit trail behind that. And again, these like LLMs, these VLMs, all these different tooling are just ways to manipulate that data to get it into a format that creates this immutable record that any person can leverage. So general contractors can know how accurate they are in their takeoffs. Subcontractors can know what prices they paid for different pieces of equipment or materials. And that becomes this additional trust layer. And we're starting to see that progression happen in market. Specifically, AI is going to help accelerate that because everyone has their data lakes, but it's all in these like silo data environments. And when you create a multiplayer environment where multiple parties are actually engaging with data based on different rules and responsibilities, you create a very large, trustworthy environment where liability decreases, but construction lawyers will never like take a step back off of that pedal that they're pushing.
Patrick, is the question who takes liability for bad estimates?
No, it's more like what role does liability play in the context of automation and specifically AI? And does it change your view of the technology adoption?
I don't know. I mean, liability in the context of estimating. I'm just not sure I understand the question really.
You can also
Like
take it
GCs
downstream.
GCs are ultimately still passing on liability to the subs, right? They don't want to take any liability unless they're self-performing, and subs are still taking the majority of the liability to the extent that they're not passing it down. You know, software providers are coming in and they're saying, "Hey, this tool is amazing and it's completely accurate," but like no one's taking liability for it. I mean, those are my only thoughts there.
Do you think you would be sued if you used AI rather than a human estimator? More likely?
I think there's always a chance that someone gets sued. So, yeah, it's possible. I mean, in Canada, we don't do this. You know, we're quite kind. Apparently in the US, litigation is pretty popular, but I don't know.
I think, I think you're referring, I think like the estimator has to carry like full responsibility and liability, full stop. Like the tool is never going to take that. You can't like blame Excel for miscalculating a formula when you do a cash flow model that's reporting to the SEC. I think one thing that LLMs are going to help do is it helps like create the source link to the document so the estimator knows exactly where they got X, Y, and Z. It shows the system where it's extracted. It cross-checks the different documentation. It populates all these different things. So like the question is like, can it actually reduce liability? No, I think it still is a major issue in the industry. But these systems are going to help populate the information so the estimator is more knowledgeable about the decisions that they're making and more confident in the decisions they're making. And that's like the big shift.
What I find interesting about your response, Mike, is that you're already implying in the way you're framing your response that actually there's still an estimator persona in this. So the internalization of the estimation, where I like to use the external estimator, in your world, it's still going to be there because I like actually the ability to externalize that liability, right? And so I'm not arguing whether that is right or wrong, but I'm just pointing that out. I find that fascinating because when you look at compliance spaces, legal spaces, tax spaces, etc., people use external service providers not just because of the competence of the specialization, but also because in some ways you can actually externalize blame. I do wonder if our industry, the way it's tuned right now, would ever become fully vertically integrated in that regard, because it does change the liability game to a degree, not just in estimating.
So I think a really interesting perspective is something that Harvey's done. If people aren't familiar, Harvey's like this kind of co-pilot for the legal space. And what Harvey's position is it can automate all of the manual tasks that a lawyer does on a day-to-day basis and shifts the lawyer into more of a consultative role for their customer. And that's what we're starting to see. So in this, specifically for estimating, this will then take the manual work that they're currently doing. So the manual takeoffs that take 5 hours, reduce that time. And then it gives the opportunity for that estimator to have more consultative role with the owner, with the client, to have actually value add conversations, not sitting behind the screen conversations. I think that's the biggest shift that you're going to start seeing is you're supercharging estimators to say, hey, let's actually go look at this. Like, what if I wanted to add an extra floor to this hospital? Instead of spending 2, 3, 5 weeks doing a takeoff, I'm going to run this through a model. I think what Edify is doing is really cool around this. What Snaptrude's doing around this is really, really cool, where you can have these conversations and the estimator becomes a consultant for the owner to say, here's our best guesstimation of what we can do. Here's how you expand that scope. Here's how you do different things, and not have to worry about that estimator sitting at a screen on Bluebeam going, here's my 7 GRDs. Here's my sprinklers. Actually shift this into more of a consultative approach. And I think that's super, super important.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's where we are going. We're just not there yet because there's still a lot of busy work being done here. And again, so dependent on what we're talking about, right? Like if we're talking about a design build where, there's no drawings and it's a sole source negotiated deal, you're not starting with quantity takeoffs, right? If it's hard bid, yeah, there's a lot of revisions. You are. So again, it's not by and large, people are spending a lot of time in takeoffs, but you talk to the majority of the market, which are small GCs, small subs, they are looking at them because they need to know what the scope is. And it's common that an electrical contractor just misses something with a reference in a mechanical drawing. And it's common that they miscount things and they take liability for that. And, these are the problems that we want to solve, but it's just not solved yet.
I think one interesting thing that we're like, I'd love to get Luigi's thought. This is a debate topic, but just like we're starting to see like this start like aggregate and then expand it across the network. So instead of having 7 electrical people do a takeoff, you crowdsource the information. So again, like all about reducing the time and complexity of this process. So if an electrical contractor gets the drawings, does a takeoff in Provision or wherever, and then it's validated in a sense, human in the loop, trusted, why can't that just be pushed out to the other electrical subcontractors and do that across every scope? Because in reality, like, why is the owner goes to an engineer, an architect, designs a building, they do quantity takeoffs, they do everything in a model, they go hide that for liability reasons, and then it sends it to a GC or multiple GCs, does that 17 times, send it to a subcontractor, and the owner is paying for things in a takeoff that shouldn't even be paid for to do because of the time that's wasted doing physical takeoffs. Where I think there's a lot of really cool, interesting things with LLMs and with AI that are going to like push this forward, where it becomes more of a collaborative environment, which I know Autodesk has promised for a while, which I think is a really cool implication of this, and I think it ties to like what Luigi's doing at a lot of those pieces. I think it's just a cool thought process. Like, why is it done by everybody every single time and every single change? And it should just be kind of open sourced in that perspective.
Yeah, I hard agree. This is why design bid build sucks.
Agree.
Is because there's no just hard. It's not agree here. Also hard agree. This is why design bid build sucks. It's because the winner is the one who missed the most scope. The best price is the second best, and I hope that goes away because it's a very predatory contract model. And imagine if everyone just knew as a baseline, like this is what the scope definitely is. Now go add value with your subcontractor relationships, value engineering, and the quality of ancillary services. I think that's better for the industry, but that just doesn't exist. And I also say some GCs do believe this and actually do it. I know PCL does this. They share the quantities with their subs because in the scope of work, they don't want to have a sub relationship where the foundation of them winning is an underpriced bid. They want a good bid that covers everything. And then, they want to have a successful partner. So I agree that it shouldn't be a problem, but it still is.
So guys, we're having 20 minutes left in the debate. Let's use the last 10 minutes to go through some of the questions and comments that we had in the chat. So the next 10 minutes, I'd like to move into what we lovingly called here among the 4 of us, the rebuttals and admissions. Okay. So let me do a preliminary summary perhaps. And Mike, I'm going to start with you and throw some of the simplified positions that Luigi took today. And perhaps you want to rebut some or you want to admit some. So I think where you guys seem to agree is that some industry practices are predatory. Perhaps they should change, etc. So let's park that because that's an easy agreement. But I think Luigi is also pointing out to you that, hey, look, if you want to automate everything, do you really believe that you can get with 100% accuracy? Trust but verify is something that you say, Mike, will probably never go away. But Luigi's argument is that if you want to get as close as possible to not having to have trust but verify, a lot more needs to happen on the model side and on the specialization of the models in order to get there. How has he changed your mind?
Yeah, so I think the main point that we want to reinforce, and I want to reinforce, is that like it's never going to be 100% first pass accuracy where you just drag and drop something into a black box and get a takeoff. That's 100%. But what we're starting to see is we create and flag the system. We create a system that captures all the information and confirms and flags the information that needs to be reviewed by a human in a loop. And that's a good target for us to go to market with as the LLMs, the VLMs get better and better. So I think that's like foundationally, like I think Luigi and I agree on the idea that you can't just drag and drop the documents into a black box LLM and expect a 100% accurate document extraction. But what we're taking a strong approach on is that like the models will continue to get better. And if you have the right structural framework around what you're doing and what you're looking for, you can get to a point where the time reduction that will actually be created by using AI as opposed to doing manual takeoffs is worth the investment, worth the time, worth the risk that is associated with it.
One thing that, Luigi, before I come to you, one thing that I think the discussion also left a little bit unsolved, Mike, was that, hey, if you're not going to be accurate now, someone has to be accurate down the line. You know, the basically metal quantity discussion that we had, right? Is that, hey, maybe you right now don't need to be accurate about it. Maybe you're not going to do it right now, but at some point someone needs to procure those. Perhaps it's later down the line, etc. So what has that changed in your position when you heard that?
Yeah, I agree with Luigi's position that the accuracy for like material takeoff is not 100%, but I don't think it needs to be 100% because the subcontractor is owning the intent of the drawings. And I guarantee you there's not one contractor in the field that's like, I estimated 100,000 linear square feet of carpet and I installed 100,000 square feet of linear carpet in the project. So it's kind of a moot point to chase that accuracy because there's going to be stock. You're going through this motion. You're like, the building is never going to be perfectly designed. So you're including stock, you're including excess material, you're including all these additional things. So I think, again, it's kind of chasing a tar pit that doesn't really need to be solved. We got a position on that.
So is it fair then to summarize, Mike, your entire perhaps this discussion of the last hour or so to say, look, guys, we're moving to a Waymo world when it comes to good enough. We're going to be 100% good enough, and anything beyond good enough is a moot point. Is that a fair sort of simplified summary?
Correct. I'll take a Waymo every day over an Uber driver, hands down.
Got it. Luigi, rebuttals and admissions. I'll let you first take your stab at what Mike just said, and then I have one or two impulses here.
Yeah, good enough is good enough for the GC, but you still need to make sure you have scope coverage. And in my opinion, you have to be able to be specific about what good enough means. In my opinion, it can't have false positives. And that's my perspective here. Because again, the GC doesn't take the risk. If you're a sub, you need near perfect accuracy, depending on the discipline. Like if you're a landscaper, you want to know as close as possible to what's in the drawings, as long as you're not taking responsibility for those drawings, right? If the owner is ultimately taking responsibility and the owner and consultant are, then yeah, maybe you will give them a change order if it's 2% over what you estimated, if you have a defensible case. You don't want to be under, right? You don't want to win the job because your quantities are low. You don't want to be high because you don't want to be competitive. You want to be as close to as possible, which is the whole game. So that's my only rebuttal to Mike. But I will say, if we're talking about symbols that are labeled with text, I agree it's solved. If we're talking about tables, I agree it's solved. I agree that drawings are usually really bad. And so, a perfect quantity there maybe doesn't necessarily make sense, but you still need someone taking the risk. And ultimately, the sub's going to go off of what the drawing is, depending on the model. So that's where we agree. Where we disagree or hard disagree is yes, it may be solved for a specific case within mechanical, but estimating it's almost like a discipline of exceptions. Every discipline is different. And some don't even have lines that you can count. With electrical, for example, it's just the symbols. You got to figure out which lines make sense. And so it's very hard for that to be solved when you can't even look at the drawings and get information that way.
And I'm curious, Luigi, on that crude metaphor that we use, right? So 1900s, compressing 100 years, and then we're getting to the Waymo stage of AI and estimating. Where do you think we're actually at, and where we're going to be next year?
Where are we right now? I think we're still in, I don't even think we're not in full self-driving, right? Like if you look at the majority of the market, they're still doing this by hand, or they're using some tricks, right? But I don't think anyone's getting a full end-to-end automated takeoff yet. People are using Toggle and people are using Bob Yard, but they're still spending time doing it. So I'd say there's some automation, maybe like to your comparison again with the car, they can probably automate parallel park or, parking their car. They're not going down the freeway, hands off the wheel, sleeping, right? And they're definitely not picking up their kids with a car that has no one in it. So I think we're pretty far from that, but maybe only 2 to 3 years.
Okay. Very interesting. So just to emphasize to everyone before we move to the questions, Owen, this was a role play. It was an intellectual role play at that. Mike and Luigi both took extreme positions. I'm sure if you meet them offline, if you meet them behind the scenes, they're also going to be able to have other positions, etc. So don't add them, don't add me, don't hate us. This is something that we wanted to explore the bandwidth of options. I have to say, very grateful to both of you for taking these roles. Also to you guys in the chat, because there's amazing comments here. So with that, I'm handing it back to the UFC master himself, Owen, to walk us through some of these questions. And I definitely, Owen, perhaps would like to start with Charles' question about how does the human in the loop vis-a-vis the liability change the workflows? So one of the things that, Owen, if I may start with that and then back to you, Charles is asking guys, hey, if I have to verify by trust anyway, and it's only 90% accurate, does that mean I have to check the other 90% too? So how much time is actually saved? So perhaps you guys can react to that, and then Owen, back to you.
Sure. I can go there first. I think that's the whole problem, right? It's like, okay, we're 90% accurate. So all you got to do is check a little portion of it, right? But you don't know which sections to check, because if you did, then you'd be 100% accurate. So it defeats the purpose. But there is a certain threshold after which it doesn't make sense for them to check. And it really depends on the person and it depends on the task. So if you're saying to the sub, sure, we're 90% accurate, all you have to do is spend a little bit of time, it's hard for them to buy that argument, because if they need to get to 98% accurate, then they may spend more time verifying than actually doing it themselves. And there is a number where that's true. The GC depends on what they're looking for. If you get to 90%, then maybe they'll just go with it, because all they're trying to do is benchmark subcontractor pricing anyway. Mike, what do you think about that?
So I think when we say 90% accurate, there's still a human loop validating that the AI did it accurately. It's still reporting, hey, here's the table we've extracted. Here's the values we've extracted. Is that accurate? And then the 10% is where the confidence interval is below a metric that's defined, saying that, hey, we couldn't find X. We think it's in this range. Can you go in and validate that and do human in the loop? And then the goal would be to reduce that 10% by iterations and different technologies by creating deterministic workflows to capture that 10% or 20%. So I think you're not just giving the keys to this any takeoff tool. And if you are, it's kind of scary, right? You're giving the keys to go do this and say, instead of taking me 5 hours, it now takes me, 40 minutes to do the 100% takeoff, because 90% done is 5 minutes. It's going through and I'm just looking at a screen and saying yes, 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 as opposed to trying to find it on the 3,000 page documents. Then it has this 10 to 20%. That's hey, we weren't sure. It looks like there's a conflict where the electrical drawing shows the chiller at 460 volt and the mechanical schedule shows it at 480, as an example. Those are the types of pieces that are then flagged, and have the estimator make those decisions, create an RFI, whatever it is. So again, I don't think Luigi and I are ever saying there is ever going to be a world where you're just hey, here's the construction documents, let's go get a full estimate out of the box. I'm not going to review any of the data. I'm going to go price it based on a number that comes out of this black box. It's the goal is can you accelerate this process get people comfortable with how the process works, and then you trust but verify every action that's done by the model.
Nice. Yeah, I just want to echo Patrick's sentiment. We had some great engagement in the chat, and thanks to Luigi and Mike, and of course Patrick. Great job in moderating this for us. I'm picking up an interesting question here from Mark, because this discussion comes up a few times, has historically come up a few times on Bricks and Bytes. And what Mark is asking, this is his question as he's written it. It says, when does the industry start to deliver Revit models or restrictive view access to remotely hosted models for bid rather than 2D projections of these 3D models? So I think what the point Mark is making here, from at least my understanding of it, is why can't quantities, takeoffs, etc., be done at the authoring level versus having to go through a separate process of pulling apart these models, putting them into 2D interpretations of of the design intent, and then someone else having to do a separate job to then go and take off and estimate.
Liability.
Yeah, liability.
Engineers and architects are not paid enough to absorb the liability to do that accurate. That's why there's design intent documents. Again, all these estimating problems would be solved if you could just plug directly into the Revit model. Like it's already done as a takeoff. Like an engineer is placing fans in a model somewhere, assuming the model has been modeled. Like, yes, you should 100% be able to tie directly to there, and it solves all these problems. So the first principal problem is, how do you convince and educate owners to force architects and engineers to create incentive mechanisms to actually start exposing that data as early on as possible? We're seeing this with data centers a lot, where data centers are a little bit more, they're trying to create more like modular cookie cutter pieces to accelerate this process because of timeline constraints. But I think it's got to be a shift in the market. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else? I agree. I don't have anything to add. I mean, it would be ideal. It's just not going to happen.
Moritz says, why?
Patrick, just says that, because isn't it different, a little bit different in the EU, where they at least, like, you're more exposed in the BIM model early on? Like in the construction, like you're never bidding off of a BIM model, right? You're bidding off of a 2D document set. I'm curious, is the EU different? Is it like a little, I've heard like with quantitative surveyors and all these different things, it's a little bit better, or is this completely, is that a misunderstanding of the EU model?
Yeah, speaking now to very large projects, not the, let's say, 1 million project, but perhaps more the 100 million project, is as crazy as the general contractor, when they receive the bid package, they will actually rebuild the Revit model on their own. They will not even take the architect's model.
Yeah, I would agree. In my past time before I became a UFC host, obviously I was a quantity surveyor, so I had never actually been involved in a project where 3D model was the norm. I've never, in 12, 13 years of doing it, never ever worked on a project. Maybe one project, in fact, where the 3D model was used. So make of that what you will.
Isn't that sad? Moritz is making a very nice suggestion here, though.
I like Moritz's suggestion.
Moritz why don't we just bribe? Why don't the engineers bribe the architects to get the Revit model as reference? I think the key word is bribe.
Nice.
Mark says, estimators can be just as inaccurate with a Revit model as a set of plans, but it would allow for the estimators to be more accurate and ultimately maintain the levels and scopes of liability that we currently have. I think the liability point is an interesting one for a debate. As to why
I will also say one thing I've noticed from contractors is you don't hear them say that often, like, oh, we really missed the quantity. You know, they don't really say, oh, I completely messed up that quantity. I'm 100% over the quantity. It's not something that typically happens. But the mistakes that are really introduced are scope gaps, coordination between scopes. And that's what I see as like one of the biggest contributors to mistakes. And that, to me, is actually a failure to identify scope packages and individual requirements that interface between those. And I think you can only really solve that if you have a good understanding of the items that are required on a job and you're directionally accurate about how much there is, right? So if you know that there's a penetration through a masonry wall, you have a potential scope gap because somebody needs to insulate that wall, or someone needs to insulate that penetration, but you need to know that it's there for you to know that. And so, you know, someone may take the position of like, oh, quantities are actually not a big problem to solve, right? But you need to know directionally where they are, and you need to know that and the scopes so you know where the pitfalls are in the project so that you can minimize liability between the parties. So that's another
Actually,
thing.
I skipped that part of the conversation just to move it forward, but I want to build on that, Luigi. So in terms of the inconsistencies, omissions, etc., that you see, I think they're geometric ones or spatial ones, right? And so we skipped the whole 3D part of the conversation today, etc. Let's not go there. But then there's the other one where basically two sets of documents say something completely different. Every contractor out there that had to submit a bid is encountering them on every bid package, the inconsistencies between different documents. And so just as a follow-up to that, guys, because we skipped it, how good are actually the models today in terms of context window, etc., working with the vast amount of the bid package, the vastly different documents, and then cross-referencing what's inconsistent between the documents? How good are we today at that?
I wouldn't say it's bad.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, based on the news model that has been released, they're showing increased accuracy with extended model context windows. So what that means is the more data, more tokens you put into the model, the better recall it has. And the latest releases have shown drastic increases, and there's not this pretty drastic fall off after a certain, like 128,000 tokens as an example. So that's continuously getting better. They're doing unique things inside of the model to actually do that. I'm happy to share some links around like that if you want to get into technicalities. But again, like we're getting to the point where the model, the token window is expanding, where you could have the full context of a project inside of a token window, inside the memory of that. And then you could recall and like filter out inaccuracies pretty accurately, which would be super, super powerful.
Yeah, I agree with Mike there. It is pretty good. And Mike and I were texting back and forth when 5.2 dropped, and it's very good at coming up with RFIs. It's not just run-of-the-mill RFIs that, could be a question. These are good RFIs. Hey, the fire pump doesn't have any power. What's the power for it? With minimal prompting. So I do think it's getting really good at that. And I do think some of the coordination elements will probably be solved and will be, commonplace. What we like to do though as a company is like think about what are the hardest problems that unlock the next level of value. And in our opinion, that's the visual understanding of the documents, by and large. So it's good at these small things. I don't know if it's 100% RFI coverage because it's like quite a bit of things, but for the RFIs it does come up with, they are good.
Okay. All right.
Really long link. Just posted a good article for people to read if they want to learn more about like context window expansion, using different types of multimodal models. There was a conference, I think, a couple of weeks ago called Neural IPS, which is like kind of the leading edge on the different models that have been released. So really, really cool stuff that's coming out, and it's only getting better and better, which makes this job so much fun.
Yeah, it's true. It is really fun when models change every couple of weeks and you can build something really cool with
it. Okay, look, I think we should wrap
Patrick's
up.
on mute. Looks like he's talking.
I was saying, as we can see, you inserted your affiliate link here to the Substack. Where
my affiliate link,
yeah,
Euclid. That's a Euclid Ventures first check-in. Great for anybody looking for first check-in capital. So is Fundamental. Give a shout out to Fundamental, rock stars. Patrick's awesome.
Yeah, I second that. Fundamentals.
Oh my God. 50-50, cha-ching. Okay, thanks, guys.
Look, I think we'll wrap up here. Mike, Luigi, Patrick, thank you so much. Mike, you mentioned a few things that you're launching in the near future. Do you want to give a little bit of a shout out here? And Luigi, I'll do the same for you in a second.
Yeah, sure. For sure. So officially launching BuildVision Labs today, free AI tooling for all customers, help you do takeoffs, scope comparisons. We also will help you build out different tools. So if you're like, hey, I want this specific workflow, our team is here as a resource. It could be leveraged in your BuildVision account. It's going to be at no cost. We might have to throttle it if we get too expensive on API calls for the different models. But right now, we'll give you pretty much full access to all the power of the different AI tools that we're building.
Nice. Luigi?
So we're launching two things. One is called Chat Agent. So Chat Agent is multimodal and allows an estimator to traverse their entire drawing set and build RFIs, understand answers to questions with natural language, and ultimately find scope gaps. And that's going to be launched in the next couple of weeks. And then Scope Agent, we recently launched with our seed announcement. It allows you to build scopes of work within couple of minutes and identify scope gaps that you can clarify via RFI, or build scope of work contracts you can give to your subs. So those are two things that, if you're interested, if you're a GC, we'd love to work with you on. I want to say thank you in a couple of ways. Owen, thank you for hosting this. I know this is a different idea, and thank you for entertaining this. Patrick, thanks for being a fantastic host. Always love the rigor you bring to these conversations. Mike, fantastic doing this with you. Very, very fun. Thanks for the intellectual back and forth. Thanks for talking about actually what you're building and what you're doing, as opposed to some other people in the industry where they rant on LinkedIn about random things. Really fun sparring with you, and really appreciate the time you put into this.
Yeah, same. Thank you, guys.
Very mutual.
Shall we do it one more time for everyone? Thanks, everyone. See you next time.